Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series. And today we're going to welcome our guest, Kelsey Russell, a dynamic media literacy influencer and a full time graduate student at Teachers College, Columbia University. She leverages her nearly 100,000 TikTok followers to blend education and entertainment, fostering a renewed interest in print media. Originally from Atlanta and a Boston University alumnus, she is on a mission to make education engaging and accessible. Good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. I am doing well. I'm excited it's Friday. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been looking forward. I saw you on our friend's show, and I really was interested in talking to you because I'm a newspaper paper person, and my family grew up with newspapers around the house. And to see someone so young that's doing all these things, so let's go back and start from the beginning. How did all this come about? walk us
Yeah,
walk us through that career journey.
similar to you, Ron, I grew up with a family that read physical newspapers and still does. So I usually say my revival of love for newspapers came from three things. I had just finished my first year of graduate school, and you're reminding me I need to update that I actually graduated 3 weeks ago. So no longer a full-time student. But I will say I finished my first year of graduate school. I felt like I had been in this really academic bubble and was struggling to relate things in the classroom to world events. I would find myself sitting at dinners, and when conversations like war or
Yeah.
turmoil would come up,
Current
I
event.
right, I didn't know what to say, but I could talk about the Kardashians. I could talk about a lot of natural topics that interested me. So there was that, and then I also have been dealing with my own mental health journey of anxiety, and it was suggested to me by my therapist to find something that reminded me of what I loved when I was little. And I
Ooh,
remembered being in elementary school in the library. I never liked books, but I love like Guinness Book of World Records. I love almanacs. So I
okay.
loved gathering random pieces of information. And then it was also this sense of I noticed my curiosity was being driven by this positive algorithm on my phone. I wasn't finding information that I didn't already tell my phone I was interested in. So this need for of a natural sense of curiosity, easing anxiety, and just having those random facts made me want to bring back the physical newspaper because I remembered reading it when I was in elementary school, middle school, before I went to
Yeah.
school, and it was the highlight of my morning and my day. So yeah.
Mm. My mother would, after she did her chore, my mother was a housewife, and she'd sit at the table and she'd go through newspaper to newspaper to newspaper. And I grew up in South Carolina, so she only got one newspaper. But when she'd come to visit me in the New York region, I'd have to get three newspapers: Daily News Post and the New York Times. But she said the New York Times is a bit much. Do the other two, and she'd go through that. So current event was always kind of a big thing in our household.
Mhm.
You know, staying in tune with the news. So from that thirst to do that, and this is how all of this grew. How did you build your audience to that level?
So it actually, I had an audience prior. I would make well, I had a video that went viral, the COVID Thanksgiving, like rating my bougie family on Thanksgiving. I gave them ratings 1 through 10, and that blew up. And I always wanted some form of career that involved a camera and helping people learn. Like Star Jones was one of my first inspirations. So when I got that viral moment, I was like, okay, let me just make a video every day. So I made lifestyle content. I ended up shifting to what it was like being a Black woman, a young Black woman in Boston, because it was a very interesting place to move from Atlanta, where Black culture is so dominant and
Yeah.
so prominent, to Boston, where I had to find it in places for it to be really out loud and there. So it was
Okay.
that journey. So lifestyle content, and I kind of took a break, and I had about 40,000 followers. So when I decided to put my camera down and go on this media literacy journey, I gained a whole new audience. So really adaptation is how I grew my audience.
Mm. So you just finished school, master's degree program. What was your master's degree in?
It was in sociology and education with a policy concentration.
Okay. You know what? I was going to think maybe marketing or something. I don't know why I was thinking, something along those lines. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Give us some background for everybody that's tuning in. Kelsey comes from a very prominent family in Atlanta. So kind of walk us through that.
Sure. So my grandpa created one of the largest minority-owned construction and real estate and property management businesses in the country. He started in when he was 16. He bought his first lot from shoe shining, and actually his dad was a plasterer, so he had tools and skills. He put himself through school by a Tuskegee, renting out that first lot. And then when he came back, he grew his dad's plastering business into real estate, into property management, into concessions. And I always say that it's a very unique experience to be a Black woman growing up in a family where entrepreneurship is an expectation rather than a rarity, right? So my dad always had this mindset instilled in me that find your passion, make sure you have a job, and make sure you have another job that's making you money from that passion, and you're building a business.
Until you build that up. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and my mom too, her parents taught in the education system in Florida for over 50 years,
Okay.
Probably over like 80 years combined, or 100 years, whatever that is. So education and entrepreneurship has always been instilled in me, and has also given me access to a lot of things that I think are important to acknowledge when you're on this entrepreneurship journey so young too.
Yeah. I noticed when you were on the show the other week, your family was coming in and saying all these things. That's an interesting background, because your grandfather, Mr. Russell, I remember reading about him because my degree was in business, and I always scoured for people that looked like me that were in business. My father owned a taxi company in a small town and did well in doing that. So I knew that eventually I would want to be an entrepreneur, in other words, own a business. Out the big word behind it, because of the fact I grew up in that, and it was always about that. It wasn't about a guaranteed check and all those kinds of things.
Exactly. So it's interesting. A lot of people that I find, well, in the word entrepreneurship, I didn't know that this existed probably until about 10 or 12 years ago. I feel like we actually put a word to, I guess, a business owner. And so it's interesting to see so many entrepreneurs who come from a family that did that. And I wonder if the vocabulary even existed then to know what that was. And now we have classes and all these things about it.
But the key, that level of person, your grandparents, my father, back during that era, it wasn't called all of that. They were trying to make a living.
Make it happen. Yeah.
And trying to make it happen. They couldn't probably get jobs or careers doing something else. And this is what they kind of turned to, and they looked to set that up. So was that the biggest inspiration in your life, anchoring with a strong family structure that was doing a lot of cool things?
It was definitely an inspiration in my life, because it felt just like I said, an expectation. And I'd also say, I talk about my grandparents' family, but I have a very family-oriented mindset. I grew up in a big family, so it definitely influenced me. But then I also credit like the city of Atlanta as a whole, right? Like growing up in a city where you see people that look like you, that are in every single field. I didn't really grow up thinking, oh, I couldn't be an entertainment lawyer, or I couldn't be a fashion designer. But in the same sense, a city that has really bad social stratification. Yeah. So also realizing that equity component is so real, because as we have people who are succeeding, we have people who are consistently being pushed down economically. So I think Atlanta is a great inspiration, but also always a reality check. It inspires me too.
When I first got out of, I went to college at Benedict College in South Carolina. And when I got, my first job was with IBM, and I moved to New York. I wanted to meet Earl Graves. Oh my God. I wanted to meet Earl Graves from Black Enterprise.
Yes.
Because Earl Graves was the top of the food chain. And I went to an event and I met him. I have never been so nervous in all my life. Because of the fact, this was Earl Graves.
Yeah.
The founder of Black Enterprise magazine and in media, and now that his sons grew up, took it over, and they're doing big things all over, as a result of that. So I understand what you're saying when you have those role models that you can see, because lots of times you don't see that. Because you mentioned something earlier, your grandfather started shining shoes. My first job was working in the barbershop and shining shoes. before I got my barber's license to learn how to cut hair.
Yeah, it also makes me think too, just as like a the lack of community that I think has caused like a younger generation sometimes to not have those
Mhm.
opportunities of like these small things where you can make money. So I often wonder, I guess the equivalent to that might be like being an Uber Eats driver, but you're not communicating with people anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm sure the people whose shoes you might have shined, you had a conversation with that might have turned into a lesson or a learning moment. So I
Yes.
feel like there's just wall up of those ways that you start earning money for the first time.
Well, working in a black barber shop, that's an education within itself. That's a PhD for life.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know. Well, actually, I don't know because I've really never been in one. I actually called my
Okay.
dad's barber yesterday to try to pay for all of his haircuts for like the next 6 months for Father's Day. And his
Okay.
barber was like, "Oh, he already paid for the for the year." I was like, "Well, he's a smart man then. He's a smart man."
Okay. Okay, cool. Why did you choose that degree for your master's program? What was the impetus behind that? Because you had had a taste of kind of starting doing some things on your own.
Mhm.
Why did you choose that direction for your master's program?
So I really went into my master's program and maybe still, I wanted to be a college president. Like that was the goal I was on. I really
Okay.
wanted to get my master's, go straight into my PhD. And I felt that I really did a lot of research on college presidents that existed. And I saw that a lot of them didn't have a social science background, which
Okay.
I found fascinating. And I felt that that component was missing. And also, I studied sociology in undergrad. I studied it in my master's. And what it really taught me is the way we can see how our social identities affect what we interact with. And I was really fascinated with how our social identities affect how we interact with the majors and the things that we study because I saw patterns, right? Like I saw a lack of Black men in humanities and social sciences. I saw a push of a lot of Black women in STEM and their primary reason being making money. So I saw all of these
Okay.
patterns going on and I was interested and still am in being a college president and how do we shift to college so that those can become more equitable versus I feel pressured to go into this or I fear if I go into this
Hmm.
major I won't make enough money.
Wow.
So I think that that was why I chose what I did, and Teachers College was the only school that offered like a true blend of sociology and education.
Okay. Okay. So that's the next that journey.
Yeah, maybe the next. Honestly, if they want an interim president, I think would make me more happy.
Yeah.
I don't
I'll take
know.
that now.
I'll take that. But I would love to see that longer down the line. But
Yeah.
I know I need so much more life and business experience and work experience to be able to do that job thoroughly.
You know what I find interesting for someone your age to say, my goal is to become a college president. Some people would say, I want to become a professor or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And they may aim a little lower, but your aim is at the apex.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's my parents too. They were always like, if you're gonna aim to do something, you might as well aim to do it the highest because
Highest
on the
level.
journey you'll probably find something else. So I think
Okay.
that, and I feel like I've always loved leadership roles. I've loved somehow using the skills I have to amplify people's voices. And I think that that's why little family. And then I just think like my natural work, I guess, like character a little.
Yeah. Leadership at your age, you're thinking leadership.
Yeah.
If you could define your leadership style, what would it look like?
I would say like I hope and I yearn for it to be one that like is probably centered around more emotional
Okay.
intelligence and
Yeah.
celebrating
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, and also helping people in workspaces recognize how their emotions are affecting how they're working,
Okay.
and also a leader that like really tries to acknowledge blind spots. Like I know the areas that I am not the most skilled in, so even though I mean my leadership experience has mainly been right in college and organizations, but I would always find instances like finances, whoa, not good. Like that is one thing I will blow a budget. I will not think about what's coming next. So I feel like that I noticed that's always been a blind spot. So who can I bring in and say, I need your expertise here
Yeah.
because I don't have it, but also what can you teach me with what you know? So I think always also recognizing as a leader, you are still a student. You're not just the teacher for everybody.
Mm-hmm. To complement the skills that you may be weak in. So I was reading an article and they called it it was called the Symphonic C-Suite. And we built the leadership development program around that.
Mm.
So every person on that team has a special skill. They have blind spots and all these kinds of things. And you complement each other in that team.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things you mentioned, you said you look at people that, around within the team. Reflection. Is reflection a part of what your natural leadership style that you look back and said, "Oh, that didn't work well. What can I do better for the next time?" Or
I do think it is, and I think it's a challenge. Like I've been a person that struggles accepting like critical feedback. So I think I try to put myself in spaces where I actually ask for it more, and also. I'm a person that very much acknowledges when I'm nervous, when I'm like, I feel really uncomfortable here, but I have to do this. And I notice that levels the playing field for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I'd say reflection is a part of it. And like that sociological background, the question that I'm always asking is like, who is not in the room, whose voice is not in the room. So I think that reflection kind of comes from just like my academic training and like just kind of my natural disposition of how I see the world a little bit too. Yeah.
Well, the calmness, you said the nervousness of it. Like I do a lot of speeches but you always will have that feeling when you're being introduced to come on. So that's a natural part of doing what you're doing. That will probably never go away.
Absolutely. Oh no. And I don't get nervous for things like right until it's time. But I've noticed if I'm ever speaking and I'm nervous and I acknowledge I'm nervous, it like really just brings everything. People are like, oh, this person is human. And for whatever amazing accomplishment you're speaking for, you still have feelings. And that really, I think, just helps people feel human with you too.
And your audience probably did not pick that up if you would not have mentioned it.
Yeah, probably not.
Oh my God, you were awesome. Oh my God. Oh God, I'm so glad it's over.
Yeah. It's hard acknowledging it too, Yeah.
So the print media, digital, do you think there's an avenue there for that? You have this ability to pick up something new and you built a brand around that. So you still have your aspirations to go here. Do you think you'll test that further from the social side?
I definitely think so. I mean, I think I can do, I hope I can do as many things at once until it, unless it's not good for me. But I do hope, this print media thing has really opened my eyes to maybe a potential solution for a lot of issues that are going on within journalism, within education, within literacy, not only in the United States, but worldwide. I just think we kind of were sold a promise that technology would connect us more. And I think we're seeing how false that is. And also the social detriments that has had. So I feel like is a little bit of nostalgia and I'm like begging, I think every generation is like, oh, I wish we were like that generation a little bit. But there is something that when we got our news in print, the world did seem to be a little different and also maybe a little slower.
It was slower.
It's a good thing. It's not always good. It's just like your body, right? Like when you're working out, you get your heart rate up, you put it down, you get it up. So I think things are just moving a little too fast. And I found a way to slow it down and maybe also solve some other things going on.
That's cool. So here's a thought. Opportunity for content social. Because there's a lot of companies that are struggling with that. So you think about the publishing industry, the magazine industry, National Geographic, doesn't have a magazine anymore.
I know.
The New York Times on Sunday was this thick at one time. I get the New York Times on print that comes here now. It's like this.
Yeah, the Tuesday paper is like 3 pieces.
Exactly. Will that ever come back? It's not going to come back. So the transitioning to another source, and then you've got 24-hour news. Do you think it grew because of the fact there was no competitors, or?
What do you mean? What grew? What's exactly grew?
Print publishing downside because the social side and the media side picked up on the other side.
Yeah, I think that is what happened. I mean, I have a couple theories of what happened. I think that one, we lost the actual understanding of what a journalist is. In a lot of instances, influencers and bloggers have replaced journalists, but those are two totally separate roles and occupations. But at the same time, I think what has happened is that many people didn't actually know what a journalist did, right? They didn't know the training that went into it. There's also no sense of what is the actual professional stamp that you have as a journalist, right? Like if you're a lawyer, you take the bar. If you're a doctor, you take the medical bar. There is nothing that certifies, right, a journalist. So I think all this stuff was going on in the background that nobody knew about. And then came out bloggers and influencers, and people, I think, were yearning for an actual connection to who was writing their work, which was a really good thing. But I think now we have companies who are, hey, let's bring this influencer in with 100,000 followers to cover this event. Totally. But there's also a journalist who you are not including, who's asking the questions, who's writing the entire story. So I think we have also seen a lot of companies realize sometimes it's like cheaper also to get an influencer. So, right, money. So I think there's so many things going on at once. But to me, the biggest thing is a lot of people in younger generations don't actually know what a journalist is, don't actually know the training that goes into it. And it's quite an unsexy career in terms of the payment in the economic times we live in. So it's like a lot of things I think going on at once.
So I worked at Martha Stewart, and Weddings magazine was this thick. The Weddings magazine now is digital for the most part. No more magazines and any of those things that came about. So let's kind of switch the conversation and get back to you and talking about as you were growing to become this major influencer. What was a significant obstacle that you faced and you had to figure out a way to navigate around it?
I love this question. I would say I think the biggest obstacle, honestly, is, it might sound corny, but I think has been my own self, like a little bit of self-doubt of what is actually going on. I think being an influencer is really weird because it's my personality and my skills mixed together, but really my personality that is the job. And so I think that I have had a lot of self-doubt, like, okay, I have these followers. What does that actually mean? How does that translate? In my mind, really realizing this is an entrepreneur journey. So I would say something I'm still overcoming is like the self-doubt and also the ability to separate like work and life because it is my personality. So, you know, when I go out, people want to talk about the accomplishments and everything. And I'm really happy that they do. But to me, it's like work. It's kind of like if you're a doctor and if you're a therapist, nobody wants to hear about they don't want to talk about mental health all day. So I think that has been the biggest obstacle, is overcoming that. And then also changing my brand to realize I have a younger audience, right? Like I'm 23, I'm young. I still like to go out and have fun, but realizing my role on the internet is a little bit bigger now. So I think really adapting that brand and realizing I can't do some things that I want to do at the age I'm at on the internet and stuff.
So how are you going to navigate that if you were to go into academia and say become a professor at a college or whatever, working at a college, not a professor right at 23 years old, but I'm saying, how do you think you're going to navigate that? Have you given any thoughts to that next steps post master's completion?
Yeah, I mean, I have given thought. I feel like right now I'm on this journey of being a little bit of a reporter and journalist on the First Stop News for kids, my brand deal. So I think what comes next really is just always making sure whatever I do has an educational lens and a focus, because that way I hope I can spin it to matter. But also realizing I probably should listen to my mom when she texts me, like, you should take this now because you're cursed, or you should do this.
Always here, right?
Yeah. She texted me yesterday about something. I was like, but I had to text her, like, you do have a point. So I think
you'd be surprised. We've had so many guests on, and their mom will comment, and it's, oh, that's my mom. We'll just deal with this later,
If my mom, she's on the West Coast right now. My niece is graduating. If they were on East Coast time, they would definitely be on here.
They would definitely listen in on that.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about mentorship, who's been a strong mentor in your career to this point?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so I think some of my strongest mentors have really been people that I've met in college and then also on the influencer journey. So one that I think of is Stacey Ulrich, who I was a peer leader. I can't even remember the name of it now in school, but essentially I would co-teach a class with her for freshmen to help them navigate their first year in school. Um, Excuse New York and whatever's going on out
That's
there.
okay. That's
Right.
okay.
Um, and I think for her, I think I didn't realize she was a mentor at the time, but she was. And
Mhm.
she was a person who really brought me under her wing, helped me out. And then I think mentorship is interesting because I realized I kind of the word feels weird. It feels strange. I don't know even how to go about describing somebody. I recently told my mom, I was like, I think this person's my mentor. She was like, well, are you going to ask them to be? I was like, am I proposing? Can you be my
Yeah,
mentor?
is it a formal process we go through?
Yeah. So I think I've had a lot of mentors during this time, but I don't know if I've always seen them as mentors. Maybe just people I look up to, people that have supported me. So I saw that question. I was like,
Mm,
what is a mentor and how do you even go about can I
yeah,
call somebody my mentor if they don't call me their mentee? I don't
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know, you know?
So let's flip that. Your role as a mentor. You've
Mhm.
got 100,000 followers. People are looking at you, looking at what you're doing, and they're impressed by what you're doing, and they may reach out. How are you mentoring people from your side, the other side?
Yeah, so I have a lot of young girls reach out to me specifically about college. I had a video a while about I'm a Posse Scholar, which is a full-time tuition scholarship, and it's all about leadership and bringing active agents of change to campus. And so they asked for help, but I'm just like, well, let's just talk through it. Like, what do you want in college? What do you not want? Here are some things. One of the things I tell people, like, you have agency. If you want to go to school somewhere, for me, I needed somewhere I could get my nails, hair, and lashes done within 10 minutes of campus, which meant I wasn't going to be in the middle of nowhere. And so
Yeah, yeah.
I tell people, you want to think about what makes you happy. And so then a lot of times I'll read over their college essays. I'll help them edit. I'll talk through them. And it's a lot of girls I've never met. I just voice message to them. I help them. So that's what it looks like to me is when they say they need help. I'm like, well, let's start with what do you want? What's your end goal? And let me figure out what I have the bandwidth to help you with. So that's what mentorship looks like to me is honestly really helping people also figure out what they want because so many of us don't know. And so many
Mhm,
of us are always trying to figure that out.
mhm. So you have two poles. You're saying Ultimate this year at the Apex that we talked about, and then that social media side. Do you think that's going to conflict, or will they complement each other? Because I'm thinking if I had this, I said, you know what, let me pursue this for a while before I move into this. What does that look like? Because you have two avenues to move towards.
Mhm.
I can continue this and build this out, the branding, the marketing side of this, or I can go into academia and I'm the assistant professor and I'm doing what I do in front of my group.
Exactly. I think, it's interesting you asked that. The way my mind works is that everything works together. And if it's not meant to be, then it won't happen. Because I do also hope to build the brand. Like, I would love to be a producer. I would love to produce like entertaining shows about education and have my own media company. So I have a lot of big dreams. And I will say that I think we're going to see a generational shift. Like, I even see a lot of young politicians, they're very active on social media. So I
Yes.
think we're entering an era where if you almost do not have a digital or social footprint, it might be a detriment to you.
Yeah.
So I think probably in the next, I would say 30 to 40 years, we're going to see college presidents that were influencers, or we're going to see politicians that do have social media
Yeah.
followers
I love
because
the following.
yeah, so I think that is how the world is changing. Like even politicians that I find out about now, I find about them through TikTok and
Mhm.
Instagram.
Yeah.
So things are changing. So I think that if it's not meant to be and my brand is not appropriate to lead an institution, I think that is totally fine and I'm willing to accept that. But if
Okay.
I also find that my love for academia is greater than a love for entertainment that might conflict, then that's not the right choice. So
Okay.
that's how I see it.
Okay. So how does your show work? What is the tagline for your show? It's on TikTok, correct? TikTok.
The news show
Yeah.
or the one, oh, so it's called First Stop News. I'm actually just the host of it, the co-host.
Okay.
It's not my show. It's produced through Youth Media International.
Okay.
It comes out on YouTube every Thursday at 3 p.m. and it's
Okay.
for kids 8 through 12 because nobody is really serving news to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because you can't market, they're not monetizable really. Only
Yeah.
13 over, so a lot of people
Yeah.
just leave them out. Yep. So, right. So the idea is like it's a show that kids can watch with their parents, but
Okay.
also I will say if you're 20, if you're 30, if you're 40, it's a great show too, because I think we all know, I mean, there's a lot of things. We're in a literacy crisis overall. So I think that anything to me in that age range is great for anybody, especially if, you just need help understanding things going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. So you just graduated, what, a couple of weeks ago, was it?
Yeah, I think 3 weeks ago now, but 3 weeks ago.
Okay. So you're going to stay in New York, or you're going to probably transition back to the Big A?
I'll stay in New York. They're probably going to have to drag me out of here when it's time. I love it here. I think it's perfect for what I'm doing. And I always have a reason to be in Atlanta, so I'm not quite in a rush to get back.
Okay. Okay, cool. So when you talked about the future of media and all these things are moving to a different era. When you look back on everything that you've done, from an idea to 100,000 followers, and trust me, that's not easy for people that are not into social media. What would you consider your most significant achievement at this point?
I would consider probably my most significant achievement. I would have to say it's honestly been a whirlwind of 9 months. I'm like, wow, it's been a lot. I would say I recently spoke in Paris at a conference called Change Now, all about climate-oriented solutions. And that was my first international speaking engagement. And so you reached out to me before that happened. But I think that was the biggest accomplishment for me because it also checked me of how much I think through this very American lens, and how I did not realize the international audience that I had a reach for and had interest in. So I call that a big accomplishment because it shifted my mindset of this is bigger than this print media. I'm really working and hope to solve this lack of people don't love learning anymore. We've lost our love for it. We've lost the importance of it. We've lost the respect we've had for educators, the education system, for civics, honestly, for curiosity. So I think that was just such a big moment for me because one, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm in Paris. Paris is such a fab city. But also this is bigger than my TikTok. This is something I feel like I'm onto something that can just help people become more confident, because when we're more equipped with knowledge, we're more confident in the world. So that's what I think I realized.
I find that U.S. citizens aren't global citizens. They live in a town and they never leave the town. And everything is based on that. They don't explore. I went to a dinner party in Dubai, and someone mentioned that the U.S. market has the lowest percentage of people with passports. And I said, oh, you got to be kidding me. That's not correct. I said, Google it when you get home. I got home, I looked at it, and they were correct.
That is fascinating.
Yes, the lowest percentage of passports in all other countries. And it could be because in other countries, they're connected together. Europe, you go one country. I was in Germany a few weeks ago. I was in Brussels the following week, and it's not that far between those two. But you find that, and you look at, I don't want to even go into that, but you look at what's happening in the U.S. today, and it's just, it's unreal.
It's very unreal. And it's not, I will say, so I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and my line sister, she actually lives a couple doors down from me in New York by coincidence. And she was really the first one to check me your thinking sucks. She was like, you were the most American person I have ever met in my life. And she's from Togo herself. And she has her own business, but she was really the one who challenged me the first time. Like, this was years before this all happened, and this TikTok blew up. She's like, if you actually want to succeed, you need to start thinking with a global mindset. And it made me realize also how much of our education system, and I think this is also because the United States is in its toddler stage. It's in its terrible twos. It's like, it hasn't really been around for that long. It teaches about other countries in a deficit mindset everywhere. Mm-hmm. Like, we are better, and you can go to parts of the United States and experience those other countries. You don't want to go there. So it really comes from just the lack of exposure in our education system to seeing the benefits and the blessings that other countries bring to the world, mm-hmm. and focuses on negative conflict. So it's deep, and we aren't global citizens. And I want us to realize the world is bigger than the states and the states that neighbor you.
Yeah. I sent my kids to a program, and she was like in 8th grade, and she went to travel Europe for the summer. Mm-hmm. And she said it was the most amazing experience. And we had never really traveled outside and that started our thirst for traveling. So I'm here in New York now for the next week, and then, mm-hmm. I'm going to be leaving and going to Singapore, Hong Kong first, Singapore next, back to Dubai, Tanzania, and it just goes on and on. And it's a totally different context when you travel the world, because you see things through a different lens versus the lens that you grew up in. I grew up in a town that was 8,000 people, and that was one of the largest towns in the area.
Where'd you grow up? My family's from Greenville. Where'd you grow up in South Carolina?
I grew up in South Carolina, maybe 45 minutes north of Myrtle Beach. Okay, yeah, so that's kind of the reference point there. Mm-hmm. So I want to do a shout out to some of our frequent listeners. Jim Moy he's a big shot attorney based in Washington, D.C. Peter Piccinini says that's awesome, and talking about the conversation we're having. John Self is started as a newspaper reporter. And he's gone from a journalist to now he was executive search, and now he does this career site, and he's totally online. So he's kind of reinvented himself 2 or 3 times, and he was also a guest. Jim Moy was a guest as well. Peter is coming up as soon as we get the invite out to them. So the reason that we started the show is that we wanted to bring people in that could give more global experience, because if you look at the guests we have, they come from all over the world.
They sure do. That's why I really respect this show, the audience and the guests you have on here.
Because we want a diverse audience, because their insight from living, if you're an Emirati living in Middle East, that's a totally different concept than someone I'm talking to that's from the East Coast.
Yeah.
In doing that. So I talked to you about, what's possibly next, and how could that look? What would that look like in your next journey? If you could look out maybe the next 2 to 3 years, where would you see yourself?
I love this question. I love questions like this. I mean, I would definitely see myself probably still based in New York, location-wise based in New York. Okay. But I would see myself really in the early stages of creating I don't know if I want to call it media or education company. And also my brand has expanded more so to literacy overall, whether that's financial literacy, media literacy. And I would also just see myself once again having just so much more of an international presence. Yeah. I would see myself hopefully as somebody a little more established that newspapers and media companies cannot come to for the solution, but help show them other people that can be a part of the solution, younger people that are in this journey. So that's what I would hope 2 years would look like for me. And just using platforms that already exist, companies that already exist, in my voice to become this Gen Z leader of learning and like falling back in love with it. So I think the next 2 years are a little more open, and probably I should think about owning some property too, and probably thinking about also just being way more financially literate. I will say that in the next 2 years is something, and sharing that journey. And now you also have me thinking on my vision board too. I do want to start writing some sort of book about this influencer journey and the things that I have learned, because it's really been unique in terms of the things that they don't tell you and things that are just not open in the influencer world, like how much people are getting paid. You can really, Uncle Sam can really get you if you're not on your P's and Q's. So just learning all of these things, I think I want to start jotting those thoughts down so they can eventually turn into something.
I tell you what intrigued me in listening to your interview on Shree's show is that how focused you were, or how focused you are at this stage in your life to see someone as young as you are that's focused. Because lots of times, if I were to talk to people in your age group, they're trying to figure it out. And, they might not see that aspiration to become a college president. They may think maybe a step above that. But meanwhile, I'm building this. And I found that so amazing. And I said, I would love to have this conversation. And this is why I reached out to you. I told Shree, I said, I'm going to reach out to her because I love the conversation you had. So you create that imprint. Is that how the Paris deal came into play? Someone saw that, or someone heard this and said, let me reach out. We'll fly you over.
Yeah, I think somebody read a Slate article that was put out and they kind of just saved it thinking it was really cool. Kristen Davis, who I actually call my mentor myself. And I asked her to be my mentor in a letter. I wrote her a thank you.
Officially.
And my mom was like, why don't you just write her a letter and tell her how you feel and just thank her for being your mentor? Just thank her for that. Yeah. And I'm a big handwriting letter person. It's very, very important. And so I just wrote her a handwritten letter. But anyway, she saved the article. And she also used to work, I think she still works there at the Learning Planet Institute, which is really like an education learning hub that's based in Paris. And she had a festival, UNESCO. She wanted me to be a speaker. And this is what I realized real mentorship looked like. After that, she said, well, what else do you want? Like, what can I do to help you? I was like, oh, this is what a mentor looks like, right? They're like, they're like, what do you want? And in that moment, I was like, I got to figure out what I want on the phone. So I was like, I want to have a more international presence. It was the first thing that came to mind. Yeah. And I was like, and I want to public speak more. I love to public speak. And she's like, okay, well, let's make it happen. And that's when I realized, yes, she also found me, but it was also up to me to voice what I wanted. And now I go into things thinking, oh, what do I want? But also don't be afraid to ask for things. Like the worst thing somebody is going to say is no. And then what? Like once you get a decent amount of no's, it's no longer scary. It's just like, oh, okay, thank you for your time. And also most people will be like, I'll see what I can do versus no. They usually just leave it as I see what I can do. You don't hear back. And if you check back in, sometimes like, oh, well, maybe I can do something now. So that is what I think got it to me, right? Like somebody naturally found me, but also asking for what I wanted to.
Mm-hmm. So that speaking opportunity opens up so many opportunities that you would never receive. Mm-hmm. Because you never know who's sitting in the audience.
Right.
And someone could be sitting in that audience that could reach out to you and say, and this happened to me when I first moved to the Middle East. I was giving a speech at a conference, and I was always giving speeches, so it was no big deal. And someone was waiting for me at the end of the stage, and they said, here's my card. Who's representing you? I'm like, so what is that supposed to mean? I said, representing me as in what? She says, I would love to talk to you about representing you as in my speakers bureau.
Yeah.
Never would have happened if that would not have happened. And that created an entirely new, I'm going to get back to this, an entirely new revenue stream. Yes. that comes about, as a result of that. So being in the right place, right time. And sometimes you never know. You do something, sometimes you may not want to do it. And you get there and all of a sudden there's an opportunity that you can possibly move towards something else.
Yeah. And even to bring it back to my family, that's something my dad is always like, showing up is half of it. Like really the majority of it is just getting your butt there and being there. Yeah. The rest, if you do that effort, and I don't know, like I'm also a little bit of a religious person, like if you just show up, things are going to happen. The right things are going to happen. If you don't go, they literally cannot happen. So I also like logically, if an opportunity comes and you have the capability to do it, take care of yourself. You don't need to like overwhelm yourself. But if it comes, you better take it. because if you keep saying no to things, people stop asking you to do things too. So just show up. And usually if you show up, a lot of things happen.
I know that when I'm in Dubai, there's something going on every night. And someone will say, Ron, come on over. We're going to have this thing. Here's a ticket. And lots of times I did not want to go because you'd worked all day and you didn't feel like, but I noticed that every time I went to something that I didn't want to go, something blossomed.
Oh yeah, that's what it had. The stuff you want to go to, it's funny, right? The stuff you're
I wanted to go, nothing would happen.
Happens. It's the stuff that you never go to. And I think it's because when you kind of force yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable, you're growing. So naturally, if you're growing, things that also are growing are they're gonna attract. So yeah, you got to show up.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, because as I said, I was really intrigued by you and what you had accomplished at this early age. And I know that we'll be reading about you later on. I'll follow you and all those kind of things. And so you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram.
And LinkedIn. Those are like the 3 platforms you can find me. Hopefully on YouTube soon. I would like to get to a place where I can really I just want someone to edit it. I cannot stand editing videos. So I YouTube soon, definitely within the next year. And you'll never find me on Twitter or X. Yeah.
That's another discussion offline.
You were already there. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Stay online. I want to speak to you after we go offline.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.